Delaney had always been the wild one, the girl who chased dust devils across the flatlands on her beat-up Schwinn, kicking up red dirt like she could outrun the weight of her family's expectations. Born and raised in Dust Creek, population 1,247, give or take a tumbleweed, she was the third of 5 kids to Elias and Ruth Whitaker, ranchers whose lives revolved around the rhythm of cattle drives and Sunday sermons at the First Baptist Church. West Texas wasn't kind to dreamers. It baked them hard, like adobe bricks left too long in the kiln. But Delaney dreamed anyway, of cities with lights that didn't flicker out at 9 p.m., of stories that didn't end with, and then she married the foreman from over in Lubbock. She was 25 when she met Margaret Hale, fresh out of a stalled nursing program in Amarillo, hired on at the Dust Creek Clinic to patch up the ranch hands who came in smelling of diesel and despair. Margaret was everything Delaney wasn't. Soft-spoken with a laugh like wind chimes in a rare spring breeze, her hazel eyes holding a quiet fire that spoke of books read under covers and secrets whispered to the stars. She'd grown up in the Panhandle, daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, but Dust Creek had called her back after her mama's cancer took her too quick. "I need roots," she told her recruiter over the phone, voice steady as she ignored the ache in her chest. Roots, she thought, even if they tangled in the thorny scrub of small-town judgment. Their first real conversation happened in the clinic's waiting room, late on a Friday when the heat wave had everyone wilting like overripe peaches. Delaney had sliced her hand open on a rusted fence post while mending wire for her daddy's herd. She sat there, blood dripping onto the linoleum, cursing under her breath as the receptionist droned on about paperwork. "Here, let me see." Margaret appeared like a mirage, kneeling with a gauze pad in that unflappable calm. Her fingers were cool against Delaney's skin, steady as she cleaned the gash. Up close, Delaney caught the faint scent of lavender soap, a rebellion against the town staple of bargain bin shampoo. "Ain't you the new nurse?" Delaney asked, wincing as the antiseptic stung. "Heard you fixed up old man Jenkins' leg without him hollerin' once." Margaret smiled, that half-cocked thing that made her freckles dance. "Guilty. And you're Delaney Whitaker, right? The one who rides broncs at the county fair like she's got a death wish." Delaney chuckled low and rough. "Guilty. Though last time the damn thing threw me into the barrel busted my ribs. Worth it for the prize money though." As Margaret stitched her up neat, precise loops that would scar faint but fierce, they talked. About the fair, sure, but then it veered. The way the stars looked bigger out here, unpolluted by city glow. The ache of losing someone too soon. The quiet rebellion of reading poetry in a town that prized pickup trucks over sonnets. By the time Delaney's hand was bandaged, the waiting room had emptied, and the sun dipped low, painting the windows in bruised purples. "You ever think about leavin'?" Delaney asked, flexing her fingers. "This place. It chews you up if you let it." Margaret paused, tape dispenser in hand. "Every day. But then I remember why I came back. Mama always said home's where you plant yourself, even if the soil's stubborn." She met Delaney's eyes, something electric passing between them, unspoken but alive. "What about you?" Delaney shrugged, but her heart kicked like a Mustang. "Maybe. Someday." Someday came faster than either expected. Over the next months their paths crossed like lightning forks. Delaney dropping by the clinic with excuses. A twisted ankle from roping practice, a cough from the dust storms that rolled in like biblical plagues. Margaret started leaving books in the waiting room, dog-eared copies of Whitman and Woolf, with notes scribbled in the margins. "This line reminds me of the sunsets here, fierce and fleeting." Delaney read them all under the covers in her childhood bedroom, the walls papered with faded rodeo posters. One evening after a clinic shift that stretched into twilight, Margaret found Delaney leaning against her truck in the parking lot, engine hood propped open. "Car trouble," she called, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "More like truck betrayal," Delaney grumbled, wiping grease on her jeans. "Timing belt's shot. Daddy'll kill me if I call him out here." Margaret peered in, unafraid of the grime. "I helped Dad fix these back home. Hand me that wrench." What started as a repair turned into an hour of laughter and stories. The truck's rumble finally coaxed back to life under the floodlights. As Delaney slammed the hood, their hands brushed. Accidental then not. The air thickened, charged like before a twister. "I should," Margaret started, but Delaney stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse at her throat. "Yeah. Delaney whispered, but neither moved. Then, soft as a prayer, Margaret's lips met hers. It was tentative at first, a question, then deepening into an answer that tasted of salt and possibility. When they pulled apart, breathless, the world hadn't shifted, but it had cracked open, just enough for light to spill in. From there it was stolen moments. Drives out to the salt flats where the earth met the sky in a seamless blue, picnics under cottonwoods where they'd read aloud until voices grew husky. Delaney taught Margaret to two-step in empty barns, her calloused hands gentle on her waist. Margaret showed Delaney constellations, tracing patterns with her finger until Delaney joked they were spelling out their names in the dark. But Dusk Creek wasn't blind. Whisper started small, a raised eyebrow at the clinic when Margaret lingered too long on Delaney's chart, a sidelong glance at the feed store when they loaded hay together. Harlan, Delaney's brother, noticed first. 3 years her senior, he'd always been the golden boy. Married to his high school sweetheart, father to twin boys, foreman on the ranch with dreams of buying it outright. He cornered Delaney one dawn, as they branded calves under a sky still bruised with night. "You and that nurse," he said, voice low over the sizzle of iron on hide. "People are talkin'. This ain't right, Laney." "Not here." Delaney straightened, sweat stinging her eyes. "It's love, Harlan. Ain't nothing wrong with that." He spat into the dust, eyes hard as flint. "Love? Bible says different. And Daddy, you know how he'd take it." Elias Whitaker was old school, the kind of man who quoted Leviticus at supper, and believed a woman's place was in the kitchen or the pew. Ruth had softened him some, with her quiet faith in apple pies, but cancer had taken her 5 years back, leaving a void filled with silence and scripture. Delaney had tiptoed around her truth for years, dating the occasional ranch hand to keep peace, but Margaret was no tiptoe. She was a full gallop. Still they dreamed. Late nights tangled in sheets at Margaret's rented shotgun house on the edge of town. They'd talk marriage. Not if, but when. "We could go to New Mexico," Margaret murmured once, her head on Delaney's chest. "They let folks like us say I do without the pitchforks." Delaney traced the curve of her shoulder. "Or we stay. Make 'em see." Margaret lifted her head, eyes fierce. "Brave words, cowgirl. But this town's got roots deeper than mesquite. One wrong pull, and it all unravels." Delaney kissed her forehead. "Then we'll replant." The proposal came on a whim, under a harvest moon that turned the plains silver. They'd driven out to the windmill at the old double-bar ranch, abandoned since the drought of '08, where the creak of blades sang like a lullaby. Delaney dropped to one knee in the dirt, a ring pilfered from her mama's hope chest, simple gold band etched with wild roses, extended like an olive branch. "Marry me, Maggie. Here, there, wherever. But marry me." Tears tracked clean paths through the dust on Margaret's cheeks. "Yes. God, yes." Word spread like wildfire in August. They filed the paperwork in secret, drove to the county line for the license, but Dusk Creek had eyes everywhere. The invitations went out modest, handwritten cards with pressed bluebonnets to the few allies, the clinic receptionist who'd become a confidant, the librarian who'd slipped them forbidden reads, a handful of out-of-towners who'd escaped the town's grip. Harlan declined with a curt note. "Won't be part of this shame." Elias stayed silent, his absence louder than any sermon. The wedding day dawned brutal, heat mirage dancing off the blacktop. The Miller Ranch, borrowed from a cousin who'd moved to Austin, sprawled under a sky building to thunderheads. Folding chairs ringed a aisle of wild grass. An arch of mesquite branches heavy with fairy lights strung for dusk. Margaret's gown whispered against the earth as she paced the bridal tent. A converted horse trailer, fingers twisting her necklace, a locket with her mama's photo. "You look like a dream," the receptionist, Carla, said, fussing with the lace. "Both of you." Delaney in her sundress felt exposed, the fabric clinging like a second skin. "Feels more like a storm waitin' to break." Carla squeezed her arm. "Storms pass. Love don't." Officiant was a justice from over in Odessa, a wiry woman named Rita with a no-nonsense drawl and a rainbow pin on her lapel. "Y'all ready?" she asked as guests trickled in, 20 souls, a mix of hope and hesitation. The music started. A fiddle tune on a portable speaker, jaunty against the wind's low moan. Margaret walked first, arm looped through Carla's, her curls catching the light like spun gold. Delaney waited at the altar, heart hammering until she saw her. approaching slow, eyes locked, a smile that said we made it this far. The crowd rose, some clapping, others shifting uneasy. They stood hand in hand, Rita's voice carrying over the rustle. Delaney Whitaker, do you take Margaret Hale to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Delaney said, voice steady, though her pulse roared. And Margaret Hale, do you take Delaney Whitaker? Margaret's I do was a vow unto itself, soft but unbreakable. Rings exchanged, simple bands bought with pooled savings. Vows spoken from the heart. Promises of shared sunrises, of holding through the hard winters, of loving fierce in a world that sometimes turned cold. Then the kiss. Gentle at first, then deepening, the world narrowing to the salt of her lips, the press of her body. Cheers erupted, Carla's whoop, the librarian's applause, but undercut by mutters, a cough that sounded like disdain. And that's when Harlan's voice sliced through, from the back row where he'd lurked uninvited, face ruddy with beer and bitterness. This ain't a wedding, it's a goddamn funeral. The words landed like a gut punch. Guests gasped, a chair scraped back. Margaret's hand trembled in Delaney's, but she held fast. Harlan staggered forward, eyes wild. You're killing this family, Laney. Making a mockery in front of God and everybody. Elias appeared then from the shadows of the mesquite, his face a mask of grief and granite. He hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't spoken in weeks, but here he was, Bible tucked under his arm like a shield. Enough, son. His voice was gravel, aimed at Harlan, but his eyes, oh those eyes, fixed on Delaney with a sorrow that cut deeper than any shout. Daddy, Delaney whispered, stepping forward, but Margaret's grip anchored her. Elias shook his head, slow. I raised you better. This ain't the way. He turned, Harlan trailing like a bad shadow, and walked into the gathering dusk, leaving silence in their wake. Rita cleared her throat. By the power vested. No, Margaret said suddenly, voice clear as a bell. Wait. She faced the crowd, chin lifted. If this is a funeral, then it's for the parts of us that hid. For the fear that kept us quiet. But we're alive and we're lovin'. Who's with us? A murmur rippled, Carla's fierce nod, the librarian's tear-streaked yes. Others slipped away, chairs empty as accusations. But enough stayed. Rita pronounced them wed, and they kissed again, defiant, the storm breaking overhead in a sudden downpour that soaked them through. They danced that night in the rain, wild and free, but the joy was laced with ache. Harlan's words echoed, a ghost in the wind. The reception was a soggy affair, strung up under the ranch's sagging awning, where rainwater pooled in the folds like unshed tears. Tables groaned under potluck bounty. Deviled eggs from Carla, brisket slow-cooked by the librarian's husband, pecan pies that sweated in the humidity. Laughter bubbled up in fits, defiant against the thunder's rumble. But Delaney felt the fracture lines spiderwebbing through the night. Margaret, ever the steady one, pulled her onto the makeshift dance floor. A patch of trampled grass lit by lanterns swinging like fireflies. They're gone, Margaret murmured, her cheek against Delaney's, swaying to an old Patsy Cline tune crackling from the speaker. But we're here. Delaney nodded into her hair, inhaling lavender and rain. Yeah, but it stings, Maggie. Harlan. He was supposed to be my best man, back when we were kids buildin' forts in the hayloft. Margaret's fingers traced circles on her back. Family's not blood alone. It's who shows up. She nodded toward Carla, twirling with her wife, and the handful of others who'd braved the mud for them. Still, as the night wore on, doubt crept in like the chill after the storm. Delaney slipped away to the edge of the field, boots squelching, staring at the horizon where lightning forked silent now, illuminating the oil pumps nodding like weary sentinels. Footsteps crunched behind her. Not Margaret's light tread but heavier, hesitant. It was Tessa, Harlan's wife, clutching a foil-wrapped pie like a peace offering. Mid-30s with the same sturdy build as her twins, she had kind eyes that always seemed to apologize for her husband's bluster. He didn't mean it, she said, voice barely above the drip of rain from the eaves. Not all of it anyway. Harlan scared Laney. Of losing you, of what folks'll say at the feed store come Monday. Delaney took the pie, fingers brushing Tessa's. Scared don't give him leave to call our love a death. Tessa sighed, glancing back at the tent where laughter still flickered. I know, but this town, it's changin' slow as molasses. Remember when the Millers integrated the school board? Took years and half the pews still empty on Sundays. She paused, eyes softening. I'm proud of you. Both. Wish I had that kind of courage. They stood there a while, the pie cooling between them, until Margaret appeared, linking arms with Delaney. Tessa, she said warmly, no trace of the earlier hurt. Dance with us. Tessa hesitated, then nodded, and for a moment under the awning's shelter, they were just three women moving to the music, the world a little less jagged. But the jagged returned at dawn, when the hangover settled and the mud dried to crust. Delaney and Margaret drove back to the shotgun house in silence, the truck's cab thick with unspoken what-ifs. They made love that morning, slow, reverent, mapping each other's bodies like sacred ground. But even then the weight pressed. We can't stay, Delaney said finally, as they lay tangled in sheets that smelled of them. Not like this. Margaret propped on an elbow, curls wild. Run away? After all that? Not runnin'. Fightin' smarter. Delaney sat up, resolve hardening. There's a job in Austin Vet Tech, helpin' with the rescues. I applied last month on a whim. They called yesterday. Margaret's eyes widened, a mix of thrill and terror. Austin. Light's life. Us without the side eye. But leavin' means leavin' Mama's grave, the ranch, everything. Delaney's voice cracked. And Daddy? What if he never speaks to me again? Margaret cupped her face. Then we carry him with us. The good parts, the stories, the strength. Dust Creek made us, but it don't own us. They decided then. Pack light, give notice at the clinic, sell the truck if needed. A fresh start 200 miles east, where rain fell regular and rainbows weren't just afterthoughts. Word of their plans leaked faster than a sieve. By Tuesday the clinic buzzed, patients canceling, glares from the old guard. Margaret handled it with grace, charting notes while whispers slithered under doors. Sodom and Gomorrah, one biddy muttered, loud enough to carry. Margaret just smiled, handed her a lollipop for her grandkid. God's got bigger worries than us, ma'am. Delaney faced the ranch head-on, pulling up at noon with coffee for her daddy, hoping the peace offering might crack the ice. Elias was in the barn, forking hay, his back a wall of flannel and resentment. Heard you're leavin', he said without turning, voice flat as the plains. Yeah. Delaney set the thermos down, dust motes dancing in the shaft of light. Austin. Better pay more. Space. He paused, pitchfork hovering. Space from what? From family? From the Lord. From the hurt, Daddy. Harlan's words. They landed hard. Elias turned then, face etched deeper than she'd remembered, eyes red-rimmed. Boy's a fool, but he ain't wrong to worry. This life you chose, it's hard out there, Laney. Harder than barbed wire and drought. It's love, she said again, softer. The kind you and Mama had. Don't that count? He looked away, to the empty stall where Ruth's mare had once stamped. Your Mama. She believed in grace. Me? I believed in the book. He sighed, heavy. I ain't comin' to no goodbye. But, take this. He pressed a worn leather wallet into her hand. Inside, a faded photo of him and Ruth, young and laughing at a rodeo, and a check, modest but real. For the road. Don't make me regret it. Delaney hugged him fierce, his body stiff at first, then yielding just a fraction. I love you, Daddy. He nodded, gruff. Go on then. Before I change my mind. The betrayal came not from blood, but from the one they'd trusted most. Carla, the receptionist who'd toasted their vows loudest, who'd baked the cake with rainbow sprinkles hidden inside. It started with a phone call, late Thursday, Margaret's shift dragging as flu season hit. Delaney answered, voice light. Clinic. A pause, then a voice Delaney didn't recognize, slick, probing. This Margaret Hale's place? I'm with the Dust Creek Gazette. Word is she's running off with that Whitaker girl. Care to comment on the scandal? Delaney's blood iced. Who the hell is this? Off the record? Carla mentioned the wedding. Said it was quite the show. Click. She drove to the clinic like a bat out of hell, bursting through the doors to find Carla at the desk, face paling as Delaney slammed the receiver down. You told them? After everything. Carla's eyes darted. I didn't mean they came by as skin questions. I just let slip about the party. Thought it'd be harmless gossip. Gossip? Delaney's voice rose, echoing off the sterile walls. You outed us. Made us the punchline. Margaret emerged from the exam room, scrubs rumpled, confusion shifting to hurt as she pieced it. Carla? Why? Tears welled in Carla's eyes. I'm sorry. My sisters on staff there pressed in for dirt. I thought, if I gave a little, they'd leave y'all alone. Protect you. By handing us out? Margaret's voice broke, the first real fracture. We trusted you. With our hearts, our home. Carla reached out, but Delaney stepped back. Trust's gone now. Like dust in the wind. They left her there, sobbing into the appointment book, the drive home a blur of salt and fury. Margaret curled on the couch that night, knees to chest. Was it all fake? The cheers, the pie. Delaney knelt, pulling her close. Not all. But enough to scar. She stroked her hair. We leave sooner. Tomorrow. Packing was a ritual of release. Folding sundresses into suitcases, boxing books with notes tucked inside, leaving the locket on the kitchen table for whoever rented next. A quiet goodbye to the house that held their firsts. Neighbors avoided eye contact at the gas station, the Gazette's headline screaming from racks. Dust Creek's shame. Local nurse flees after sham wedding. Harlan called once, drunk and rambling apologies that dissolved into Bible verses, but Delaney let it ring to voicemail. The road to Austin stretched like a promise, flat and endless, the radio tuned to country stations fading into static. They stopped at a roadside diner in Abilene, neon sign buzzing eat, where pie steam rose like hope. Over coffee black as midnight, Margaret traced Delaney's ring finger. Think we'll miss it? The stars, the quiet. Delaney covered her hand. Miss the pain? No. The love we built there? Always. She leaned in, kissing her knuckles. But Austin's got stars too. And us. They arrived at dusk, the city skyline a jagged crown against the hills, horns blaring a welcome chorus. The apartment was a shoebox in East Austin. Peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was theirs, lease signed with link pinkies. Delaney started at the rescue the next week, wrangling strays with a gentleness honed on ranch calves. Margaret found shifts at a bustling ER. Her calm a balm to the chaos. For a month it was bliss. Farmers markets on Sundays, hands sticky with tamales. Nights on the balcony with cheap wine, watching thunderstorms roll without judgment. They joined a queer book club, faces lighting up at stories that mirrored their own. No footnotes needed. Delaney even called Harlan, leaving a message. We're good. Wish you were too. No reply, but she didn't chase. Then the letter came, forwarded from Dust Creek, envelope crisp as accusation. Elias's handwriting shaky. Laney girl. Harlan's gone. Took the boys, said he couldn't live with the shame. Ranch is slippin'. Come home. Please. Margaret read it over her shoulder, face draining. It's a trap. Or a cry. Delaney folded it, heart twisting. Daddy's alone now. What if? No. Margaret's voice was steel wrapped in silk. We go back, we lose ourselves again. But doubt seeded. Nights grew restless, Delaney staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin. Ghosts of mesquite haunting her dreams. Margaret noticed, pulling her closer. Talk to me. It's family, Delaney whispered. The kind that breaks you, but you love him anyway. Margaret nodded, eyes shadowed. Then we go. But together. Face it, then choose. The drive back was heavier. The planes closing in like old friends turned wary. Dust Creek greeted them unchanged, same cracked sidewalks, same gossip mill grinding. The ranch house sagged under summer's assault, windows dark. Elias met them on the porch, thinner, eyes hollowed by something deeper than grief. He's in the windmill field, he said, no hello, just a nod to Margaret that held no warmth but no venom either. Came back last night, ramblin'. They found Harlan at the old double bar, slumped against the windmill's base, bottle in hand, the creek overhead a dirge. He looked up bleary. Y'all came. Delaney knelt careful. For Daddy. For the boys, where are they? With Tessa's folks. Safe. He laughed bitter. Safer than here. Margaret hung back, arms crossed, sentinel. Harlan's gaze flicked to her, softening a fraction. You got grit, Hale. Makin' her happy. Tryin', Margaret said evenly. The words poured then, Harlan's unraveling. Whispers at the co-op turning to outright shuns, parishioners crossing the street. the weight of being the good son crushing him flat. I lashed out 'cause I was scared. For me. This town. It poisons what it loves. Delaney took his hand rough as hers. Then leave it. Come to Austin. Start over. He shook his head. Can't. Roots, remember. But his grip tightened. Forgive me. She pulled him into a hug, the kind that smelled of sweat and second chances. Already did. Elias watched from the truck, a ghost of a smile. That night over pot roast Ruth's recipe, talk turned tentative, to the boys' ball games to Austin's lights. No miracles but a thaw. They left at dawn, Harlan's promise to visit hanging like dew. Back in the city, the apartment felt brighter, the skyline a beacon. But the betrayal's scar lingered, a reminder. Love was work, fierce and forgiving. Fall crept into Austin like a secret, leaves turning copper on the live oaks, air crisping with the scent of street tacos and possibility. Delaney and Margaret settled into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the fire escape, evenings walking Lady Bird Lake, hands swinging loose. The rescue kept Delaney busy, nursing a litter of orphaned coyote pups back to wild, their yips echoing her own guarded hope. Margaret thrived in the air's bustle, her touch steadying the frantic, but some nights she'd come home hollowed, the weight of strangers' pains bleeding into theirs. The call came on a Tuesday, Harlan's number flashing like a flare. Boys want to see Aunt Laney, he said, voice stripped bare. Tessa's fill-in papers. Thinks I need space.
Delaney's gut clenched.
Come here. All of you. A week later they arrived, Harlan and the twins' 6-year-old whirlwinds named Jack and Jace, tumbling out of Tessa's SUV with backpacks and bewildered eyes. Tessa hung back, arms folded, but her nod to Margaret held respect. Heard about the divorce. Figured y'all might know a thing or two about startin' over. They barbecued that weekend, backyard strung with lights, the twins chasing fireflies while adults nursed beers and bruises. Harlan opened up slow, how the town's venom had seeped into his marriage, turning trust to ash, how Tessa's leaving was mercy, not malice. I called your wedding a funeral 'cause I was burying my own illusions, he admitted, staring into the grill's glow. Thought being straight and steady made me whole. But watching you two, it's realer than that. Margaret handed him a plate, no judgment. Whole's not a label. It's choosin' every day. Tessa softened over pie, sharing her own hidden aches, the pressure of perfect wife, the envy of their unapologetic love. By night's end, hugs lingered, promises exchanged. Weekends for the boys, therapy for Harlan, a tentative bridge back to Dust Creek on their terms. Elias's letter followed, penned careful. Proud of you, Laney. And her. Saw the Gazette, folks movin' on. Ranch is mine but heart's with you. Enclosed a deed snippet, half the acreage, his wedding gift. Build something, he wrote. Or sell. Your call. Delaney framed it, hung by the bed. Humanistic ending, she joked to Margaret one night, curled under quilts as rain pattered the roof. Margaret traced her jaw. No end. Just chapters. Climax hit unexpected, a month later, when Dust Creek's annual rodeo rolled around. The one event that pulled the town like gravity. Harlan called urgent. Daddy's entering the bronc ride-in. Slipped a disc last week but stubborn as sin. Come. For him. They debated the pull of blood versus the push of peace. One night, Margaret conceded. Then home. The drive was a time machine, planes blurring into memory. Dust Creek Arena loomed, bleachers packed under floodlights, air thick with popcorn and prejudice. They slipped in low profile, jeans and hoodies, hands unlinked but fingers brushing. Elias spotted them from the chutes, face cracking into a rare grin. Y'all made it. He rode fierce, an old bull named Wrath bucking like Judgment Day. But Elias held 8 seconds of glory that drew whoops from the crowd. Delaney cheered loudest, Margaret's arm around her waist, unashamed. After, in the beer garden, old faces approached, wary at first, then warming. The librarian hugged them tight. Missed you girls. Even a few skeptics nodded. The Gazette's old headline faded like yesterday's news. But Harlan pulled Delaney aside, face ashen. Carla's here. With the editor. They're snoopin'. Saying your leavin' broke the town. Want to follow up on the tragic lovebirds. Rage flared hot. Let him try. Margaret overheard, stepping forward. No. We own our story. She faced the garden, voice carrying. Hey, Dust Creek. Remember us? The ones who loved loud? We're still lovin'. And y'all? Time to love back, or let go. Heads turned, murmurs rising. Carla emerged, microphone in hand, eyes pleading. Just a quote. For closure. Delaney took it steady. Closure? That's on you. We found ours in Austin, family freedom. Wish you'd find yours too. The editor scribbled, crowd shifting, some applauding, others slinking away. Harlan stood tall beside them, a shield. Elias joined, arm around Margaret's shoulders. That's my girl, he rumbled. And her wife. No fists flew, no slurs shouted. Just a quiet exodus of the hard-hearted, leaving space for the rest. They drove out at midnight, rodeo lights fading in the rearview, the twins asleep in the back with promises of visits. Back in Austin, life wove deeper. Delaney's promotion to lead tech, Margaret's acceptance into a trauma counseling program. They bought rings anew, twin sapphires set in white gold, to mark the 2nd anniversary, vowing under the state capitol's dome. Witnesses a mix of new friends and old allies. Harlan moved closer, renting a place in Round Rock. Therapy turning bluster to wisdom. The boys called Margaret Aunt Maggie, braiding her curls with clumsy fingers. Elias visited once, awkward at first, but thawing over brisket, his Bible gathering dust beside their poetry shelf. Betrayal's echo lingered. Carla's article ran mild, a mea culpa disguised as feature, but it didn't define them. Instead, it humanized. A town learning slow as dawn, that loves no funeral pyre, but a hearth fire warm against the cold. On their 3rd wedding night, quiet, just them on a hill overlooking the lake, Delaney whispered. Worth the storm. Margaret smiled, stars in her eyes. Every drop. And in West Texas's shadow they burned bright.